Good morning, Golden Bear fans. Welcome to another episode of Tell the Whole Damn World. I'm your host, Reza Serafinejad, and it's another great day to be a bear. It's the second week of 2025, and before we get into everything today, both Ahmad and I want to express our heartfelt sympathies to everyone affected by the fires down in Los Angeles. It's absolutely devastating. We hope all of you out there in LA get through this okay. Sadly, Camden Jones, currently a tight end on the football team, and his family lost their home and all of their belongings in Altadena. If you are in a position to be able to help financially, a GoFundMe page has been set up, so please help contribute to that if you can. It's always a great thing when Golden Bears support other Golden Bears in need. On to better news. We have a very special episode today because we're interviewing one of my sports heroes, legendary Cal quarterback Mike Pawlawski. For those of you who may not know the story, Pawlawski led the football team to a number 7 national ranking in 1991 and lifted the collective psyche of Cal fans everywhere who began to realize that we could indeed be a top academic school and have a powerhouse athletic program. We'll hear some great stories about his time at Cal and learn more about his work as a performance mindset coach who helps people build the habits that lead to success in any area of life. He wrote an absolutely amazing book called Everyday Great, the Playbook for Winning at Everything. It's a must-read that I highly encourage all of you to pick up. Also in this episode, we're going to introduce you to a new face on our program. Leslie Mitchell will be joining us in a new segment about Cal history. The segment is intended to shine a light on interesting stories from the past about prominent people associated with Cal. But before we get to that, let's cover a few Cal sports items. The number 4 women's gymnastics team had an excellent showing at the Sprouts Farmers Market Collegiate Classic in Oklahoma City. They scored an impressive 197.275 to finish third behind number 1 Oklahoma and number 2 LSU. They're sensational. And in the coming weeks, we're hoping to interview a couple of the gymnasts on the team. They next take on UC Davis, Cornell, and Alaska Anchorage in a quad meet at the University Credit Union Center in Davis. In basketball news, the Cal women continue to shine. They're now ranked number 18 in the country after beating both number 21 NC State and Florida State at Haas. They're now 16-2, 11-0 at home, and 4-1 in the ACC. They next play the number 16 Duke Blue Devils on the road this Thursday at 5 p.m. The Cal men, meanwhile, beat Virginia for their first ACC victory, but then lost to Virginia Tech at home to move to 8-8 on the season. And in the NFL playoffs, former Cal quarterback and number 1 overall pick Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions play the Washington Commanders this Saturday at 5 p.m. Jared's put together an MVP caliber season, throwing for over 4,600 yards and 37 touchdowns, leading the Lions to a 15-2 regular season record. Let's go, Jared. And a reminder that Ahmad and I will have our first Tell the Whole Damn World get-together this Wednesday, January 15th, at Raleigh's at 4 p.m. Join us to watch the Cal men's basketball team take on the North Carolina Tar Heels in Chapel Hill. We would love to see you there. Okay, everyone, it's time to learn a little Cal history with Leslie Mitchell, and then it's on to our interview with Mike Pawlawski.
This week in Cal history.
Leslie Mitchell, Cal class of 1981, is a third-generation Cal alum. Her parents went on their very first date at Memorial Stadium for the 1954 Cal-Oklahoma game, and the whole family was there in 1982 for The Play. She writes articles about Cal sports history on her website, calbearshistory.com, and tweets about all aspects of Cal's history, as well as the stories of interesting students, faculty, and alums under the name Cal Bears History. Today, we will be talking about the legacy of legendary Cal football coach Andy Smith. We happen to be recording this segment on Wednesday, January 8th, and this day happens to be the 99th anniversary of his death. Welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Reza. I appreciate your allowing me to be part of Tell the Whole Damn World. It's a treat. I look forward to it.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. And like I was saying to a lot of other folks when we first envisioned the idea of this podcast, it was always meant to be more than just talking about sports. The original idea was to talk about all different areas of the university. And I realize this very first segment that we have for you happens to be sports related, but we are looking forward to learning more about all kinds of interesting facts and people from the university. So welcome again.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I thought I'd start off with a big one that doesn't get nearly enough attention anymore, and that's Andy Smith, who is not only the greatest coach in Cal's history, but is one of the greatest coaches in the history of football, period. He was one of the first 56 members elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. His 1920 team, 40 years later in 1960, was named the greatest team in football history. I don't think they would give him that credit anymore, but it held up for 40 years. It's just pretty darn good. I want to start off by talking about how Andy came to Cal, because I think it's a hilarious story. He came in right after we switched from rugby to football. As most people know, there was a period when Cal did not play football at all. We played rugby instead. In 1916, they decided to go back to football. And we had a problem, though, as our coach was a great rugby coach, had a great record, Jimmy Schaefer. He'd never played football and he'd never coached football. He had no idea what he was doing. So he got on the train and went back east so he could go talk to other coaches in colleges about, so how do you coach football? He was in Chicago at a bar, and the bartender said, there's this guy at Purdue you should go talk to. So he got a train ticket to Purdue. The guy there was named Andy Smith, who was the coach there at the time. He had previously coached at Penn. And he talked to him very graciously. Andy spent a couple hours talking to Jimmy Schaefer about, this is how football is played. This is how you would coach it. And finally, Jimmy Schaefer said, you know what? Why don't you come to Berkeley and be a coach? And Andy said, okay, I'll give Berkeley a try. And he was hired on the spot, even though Jimmy Schaefer had no authority to hire anybody. They just packed up and went back to Berkeley, and the administration said, okay. And that's how he started at Cal.
You didn't need a big search committee or anything like that back in that era.
They weren't even trying to hire a new guy. But after his first practice, Andy talked to the press. And I asked him, how does it look? And he said, they're the nicest bunch of guys you could ever want to meet. But all they know about football is that the ball is spherical and the field is 100 yards long. And I might as well have gone to Russia to get players if I wanted somebody who knows about football. So 3 years later, they were undefeated national champions. I'd say that's a sign of a pretty good coach.
I'll say. And my cat Coco seems to appreciate that story as well.
Well, she's obviously a discerning cat.
So he must have been, fairly young. I mean, I'd imagine early 30s maybe at that
32
time?
When he was hired at Cal.
Right. Right.
He was at Cal for 10 years. Took the first 3 years. It was, wasn't great. It was good. But it was his fourth year, his fourth season. They got all the players in place, and they not only were undefeated, but they, as many people know, they used to say this in the Andy Smith eulogy at the big game rally every year. They outscored their opponents 510-14 during the course of that year. When the University of Nevada scored a touchdown, Cal won that game 79-7, but Andy was so outraged that they'd given up a touchdown that they all had to do double drills the next week on defense because he thought that was just, they clearly had let the team down by giving up a touchdown. The big game was awesome. Not only did we beat Stanford 38-0, Cal had 18 first downs. Stanford had 0 first downs. Cal had a total of 380 yards on offense. Stanford had 19. It was a butt-kicking of major proportions. The stadium was so packed. It was at California Field, which was our old stadium, which is now where Hearst Gymnasium is. It was so packed. People were literally hanging in trees. People were up in the Campanile trying to watch. People went up to the hills, which was really far away, but they would with binoculars to try to look down and watch the game. Was that as a result of that game that they decided, yeah, let's build a bigger stadium. We definitely need a bigger stadium.
You know, it's kind of funny to me to think that when you think of Cal, first and foremost, you think academics, 100%, you know, one of the greatest academic institutions in the world. But hear you tell that story from that era, it kind of strikes me that in that time, Cal was probably better known as being an athletic power, or probably being one of the greatest football programs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our academics were fine, but they weren't anything world-shaking in 1920, I'd have to say. Anyway, it was on to the Rose Bowl after that, after the big game victory. We played Ohio State. We were not supposed to win. West Coast football had no identity, was not known at all, and nobody thought they were going to win. We beat them 28-0. And the best part of that game, and the thing to know about Andy Smith, he's a pretty conservative coach. His motto was kick and wait for a break. And it's amazing how many fumbles they would get on kicks in those days. I think because the ball was so big, and it was hard. It was a much bigger ball, like a big fat football compared. It was harder to catch. He was normally very conservative, but every once in a while he'd come out with a really wild play, trick play. And he did that in the 1920 Rose Bowl. He had a player pretend to be injured. And all of a sudden, the Cal team goes up to the line. The injured player pops up, goes into the position of center, snaps the ball back to Pesky Sprott, which is my favorite name of a Cal player ever. Pesky laterals it back to Brick Muller. Meanwhile, Brody Stevens is running full speed down the field, running right past the Ohio State defender, who didn't even bother to cover him. He apparently yelled at him, "Where the hell do you think you're going?" as he ran by him, because he never thought that was going to be a pass play. This was when pass plays were almost vanishingly rare. Muller throws the ball 56 yards in the air. It's a completion touchdown. After the game, they asked the Ohio State guy, "Why didn't you cover him?" He said, "Well, I didn't think a man could throw a ball that far." You know, and again, there was these big fat balls. They were really hard to hold. They were hard to throw, and they were not aerodynamic. But Brick Muller was a heck of a player.
It's such a different era to think that, you know, the idea of throwing a pass was considered like a trick play, basically.
Yeah. Well,
right.
In that big game that year, Stanford actually threw 12 passes. They completed 2, and 5 were intercepted. So that was the passing game back then.
That's funny. Well, that brings to mind a quote that apparently some football coach down south used to say that my friend tells me about, because he happened to go to a SEC school, and he said, when you throw the ball, there's 3 things that can happen, and 2 of them are not good.
And one of them's really bad. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Boy, that's awesome, Leslie. And then, you know, I guess with Andy Smith, then, I mean, he passed away prematurely. I mean, very young age, right?
Yes. After Cal had 5 straight undefeated seasons, 44 wins, no losses, 4 ties, outscored their opponents over that period by 1,562 points to 146 points over a period of 5 years. Andy took the train back to Pennsylvania, where he was from, to visit his family and friends and attend the Army-Navy game. He got pneumonia. This was before there were antibiotics. He also had kind of a drinking problem that probably had undermined his health a little bit. But he couldn't survive it. And he died at the age of 42, which you can't even imagine what he could have accomplished at Cal had he not passed away at such a young age.
Well, he certainly did forge quite the legacy back when he was the football coach at Cal. And I remember actually when I was a student and I was thumbing through media guides back before the internet, and you actually had printed media guides, and I was looking at the bowl section for Cal, and I thought to myself, this is a little ridiculous. It barely says anything about each of the different bowl games. And so I did some research on those different teams and wrote things up a little bit, kind of spotlight on those teams. And I remember distinctly, I put in the words for the 1920 Wonder Team in particular. I said, the world of college football may never again witness the sheer dominance displayed by the 1920 Cal football team. I mean, scoring 510 points and only giving up 14. I mean, that's just amazing. And Leslie, the description you gave is almost like you were there. So I don't know, you certainly don't look old enough.
I'm not that old. Well, one of the things that's from the Andy Smith days is we went to Rose Bowl in 20 and 21. In 1922, we were invited to the Rose Bowl again, and Andy said, nah, we don't need to go to the Rose Bowl. But I've always thought, Andy, you be careful about throwing away Rose Bowls because you never know when your school might wish they had another one.
Yeah, that would have been nice to have. Well, hey, thank you so much here, Leslie. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you want more on Andy Smith, I have a big article on him on my website, so feel free.
Where can people learn more about all of this? Your website, where is that again?
My website is calbearshistory.com, and my Twitter handle is calbearshistory.
Great. Well, perfect. Thank you so much here, Leslie. Really appreciate your time, and go Bears. We look forward to talking to you next week.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Thank you so much, Leslie. That was a lot of fun. We're looking forward to a new story next week. And now it's time for our main event. Ahmad Anderson will be joining me in a moment, and together we will welcome our featured guest, Cal Hall of Famer Mike Pawlawski, to the program. Okay, I'm going to try my best here to be composed and professional, but the 19-year-old inside of me is jumping up and down with excitement as I introduce our featured guest. What can I tell you about Mike Pawlawski that you haven't already heard? The man is legendary. He arrived on the scene at Cal in 1987, but it wasn't until fall 1990 when he burst into the collective consciousness of Cal fans everywhere, seizing control of the starting quarterback position with confidence and bravado, lifting Cal to heights not seen since the era of Pappy Waldorf. In 1990, he led Cal to a 7-4-1 record, including the first win for the Golden Bears in a bowl game since Cal beat the Alabama Crimson Tide in the Rose Bowl in 1938. The following year, in 1991, he led the Golden Bears to a 10-win season, capping the season off with a 37-13 thrashing of Clemson on New Year's Day and a number 7 national ranking in the final polls. That Citrus Bowl victory over Clemson was also Cal's last New Year's Day bowl game. As I said in our last episode with Ken Montgomery, it was a glorious time to be a Cal fan. Oh, and by the way, before Mike became our starting quarterback, Cal had not had a winning season since 1982. With Ahmad Anderson. He's the definition of a leader and a winner and stands as an iconic figure in Cal sports history who led a dramatic culture change in Cal football. We went from being a team defined by losing seasons to a top 10 football program that was intimidating and feared. He showed all of us what's possible and that Cal was indeed a sleeping giant. Is it any wonder why I'm such a huge fan? Mike went on to play in the NFL and had a heralded career in the Arena Football League, winning Arena Bowl 13. He also became an award-winning TV show producer and currently covers all of Cal's football games as the color man on KGO Radio. Oh, and on top of all that, he just wrote a truly inspirational book called Everyday Grit, the Playbook for Winning at Everything, and is a highly sought-after motivational speaker. But I've already talked way too much here. Welcome to the show, Mike. We appreciate you making the time. Thank you, my friend. I look around when you say all that. I'm like, who's that guy that they're talking about? It's so funny, right? We never quite feel like that, but when you look back, you kind of trace the steps of where you've been, and I just really appreciate that. I love being around Cal, and I love the Cal family that I'm a part of. So I appreciate you having me on. So to kick things off, it seems like you've spent your whole life overcoming adversity. And if I understand things correctly, you didn't know it at the time growing up, but you have cystic fibrosis. Yeah. So I was born with lung disease. I was literally, for the first 2 weeks of my life, I was sick as a dog in an incubator. They were trying to find what they could feed me. And so my body it wasn't doing well. And I was tested early on for cystic fibrosis. There's a thing called a salt sweat test. Babies and people with cystic fibrosis tend to have saltier sweat than most people. It's a sodium regulation channel thing. And so there's an old Norse tale that says, woe to the parents of a baby who tastes salty to the kiss, for they'll soon be gone, right? So because of that, because of the lung disease, because of all of these things, they tested me, but the test isn't super sophisticated like the test that we have today. And so it came back as inconclusive, and they kind of left it there. But I had lung disease, and I had pneumonia and croup and other lung disease from literally the time that I was born until I was about 16 years old. And so every year, every fall or every winter, just as consistent as sunset, I would have some type of lung disease. And I'd either end up in the hospital or I'd end up at home for 2 weeks trying to overcome that as I wheezed and coughed and did everything else. And so that was a huge part of my youth. And the piece of it that was really a blessing to me is that the doctors, there's one time, and I talk about this in my book, I was 6 years old. I had been on the couch watching Wonder Woman, and all of a sudden I felt my lungs tighten up, and I felt like I was literally drowning on dry land. My parents grabbed me. They rushed me to the hospital. They brought me in. They put me in front of the doctors. And the doctors did everything, right? They're putting the oxygen on me, giving me IVs, putting me on the heart monitors, doing everything you do in an intensive care situation for a kid who cannot breathe. And I literally could not breathe. And so they got me to a point where I was stabilized. They got me to a point where I wasn't in absolute dire need and danger of dying in that moment. And they told my parents, if he makes it through the night, he'll probably be okay. And I couldn't imagine as a parent hearing that. But my parents kind of decided in that moment during that trip that they were going to do everything they could. They were going to start taking control back in the situation, which is really what humans need in everything we do, is to find a way to exert control over our situation. And the next morning or the next day, the doctor was talking to him. He said, you may consider sports, to help him strengthen his lungs. And my dad was a football guy, track guy. My mom grew up in Germany, wartime Germany, so she was an overcomer. And they were going to put me in sports anyway. So they're like, okay, if a little is good, a lot is great. And they put me in every single possible sport they could find. And it helped me to breathe. It helped me to strengthen my lungs. Just like building muscle, I built my ability to breathe. Sports gave me a way out, right? It's great for mental health, physical exercise. It's great for physical health in terms of being able to breathe and muscle tone. But I learned that I could control my ability to breathe through how hard I worked in sports, through overcoming in sports. And that was one of the most important lessons I could possibly learn in my life.
Yeah. And from what I understand in your book, you are characterized as being ultra competitive, but really what drove you, at least early on, was the fear of ending up again in the oxygen tent and all of that, just the fear of not being able to breathe, right?
Yeah, a huge piece of who we are, right? The identity that we create for ourselves is the story that we tell ourselves, about our experiences, about all of that. And as I look back on my experience, I've done a ton of research in this because I've literally been studying and thinking about this since that young age, about how to overcome, how to be resilient, how to improve at all times. And so that's been a part of my mentality from the beginning. But as I looked back, as I was writing my book, I recognized I am intensely competitive. You talk to anybody who played with me and they'll tell you I am a competitor. I am always ready to go and I want to win at everything. But a huge piece of that, where I learned it, was the
competition to overcome my disability, my inability to breathe. When you're fighting for breath, there is nothing more important than to get that breath. And so the story I told myself is that I am competing for that, which then naturally bled into everything I did. And it became a natural part of my identity that I was a competitor at everything that I did. And so it was, though people would look at that as a curse, right? The cystic fibrosis and being sick. And this is not to take away from people who have extreme cases of it, because obviously it's dire. But it was really a blessing for me because it helped me to learn how to overcome, how to compete with things that are uncomfortable, which is something I think that could really help a lot of people today. Learning, rather than pursuing comfort, pursuing excellence, pursuing achievement, pursuing resilience.
If I could say, first of all, Mike, it's really glad to have you on here, man. It's a good deal. Nothing I have experienced, what you shared, I've gone through nothing like that in my life. However, I'm an asthmatic and went through similar circumstances from a young child of going into the hospital, allergy related, not knowing what was going on, running and being out of breath. When it finally hit me, I was playing tackle football as a young kid, and I was under the pile. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. I mean, it was crazy. And I was 5'9.5" when I played football for Cal, and skinny's all getting, but was a small kid. I started throwing people off me like I was the Hulk. And my parents said, "What's going on? I can't breathe. I can't breathe." Only thing I can remember that connects with what you just shared was finding sports in my life, track and football, to bring out, as the doctor said, building that muscle. But I felt like it also created that incredible confidence that I could overcome this when these other folks in my life didn't have what people called a disability, was what was fueling my superpower. One last piece, when I was playing against USC in 1980, we were traveling down there. I was somewhere the night before and had an asthma attack. They rushed me to Alta Bates, got a treatment, took all kinds of medication, pills, inhalers, all that, the bird they called it. I get on the bus, go down to Smallfield, USC, and play in the game. So I commend you. You are a Cal superhero, and a truly a story of encouragement. And folks need to read the book.
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's people. I mean, if you haven't had breathing problems, overcoming the inability to breathe, there is nothing more important, and it is incredibly stressful to have the thing that people take for granted, right? The ability to draw air. People don't think about breathing. It's part of your autonomic nervous system. It just happens, and all of a sudden you can't have it, and you recognize it, and you feel that the interoception, right? The ability to feel your inner feelings comes into play, and there is nothing more important than drawing breath. And so it's a scary experience, but it sounds like, Ahmad, you use sports to overcome it too. And I think that's why sports are such a great thing for young kids, is you learn so many important tools from resiliency, from being able to put in the work, from adapting and growing, the learning that your body will grow, that you will improve. And so I just think that sports are so key, and getting the generations of kids behind us to understand that comfort is not what we need to pursue. What we need to pursue is performance. What we need to pursue is being better with each other. What we need to pursue is teamwork, because those are all the things that we are built for. We're built to perform. We're built to interact. Our architecture is literally built to be social. And so we work best in teams.
Great
That's nicely said there, Mike. Yeah. I mean, when I take a look at it, both of you guys really kind of took a weakness and then turned that into a strength through sports. I think that's certainly something that I think we all could learn a lesson from. I'm sure all the Cal fans out there are going to be interested to know how you ended up at Cal and your first impressions when you got to campus. And had you ever been up to the Bay Area or Berkeley before?
I hadn't been to the Bay Area, and Cal had just switched over coaches. So Cap's era ended, Bruce Snyder was taking over. And I was being recruited by North Carolina State. That was my first recruiting trip. Arizona, they had just switched out coaches. Dick Tomey had just taken over at Arizona. So he was recruiting me down there. Utah, that was the other place that I took a trip to. And then there was Iowa came in late. There were some other schools that kind of came in late, but never really pushed on that edge. But those are the 4 schools I traveled to. Cal was, I think, my 3rd trip overall. And when I first got the recruiting letter from Cal, I said, man, there's no way I'm going there. The football team wasn't great. I was like, academically, that's just got to be so brutal. Just to go there and to try to do football and to do the academics and to do everything at the same time. It just sounds really difficult. And so I was sure that I was not going to Cal. And then Mariucci came down to recruit our area. And I met him, and obviously Mooch has charisma about him, like very few people that you meet on this earth. And I got to like him. He talked to me about what Cal offered. He showed me a different side of Cal, although he was brand new to he was just getting adjusted to Cal himself, but showed me a different side of it. His sales side came out. And so he showed me a different side of Cal. And then when I came up on my trip, I got to meet Terry Shea, who was my quarterback coach for my first 3 years, an incredible human being, really a great mentor for me when I was a young quarterback because I knew nothing about playing the position. And then I got to meet Bruce Snyder. And upon my first discussion with Bruce, I understood exactly what his vision was, and I could see it from that first meeting with him. Everywhere else I went felt like a typical football program. It's, you're a cog in the wheel. We're going to plug you in. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. It's football and blah, blah, blah. And so it didn't appeal to me as much. All the other schools did all the things that you saw during the recruiting videos of the time, trying to get me to come. And Cal was the only one literally that played it straight up, straight by the board in terms of bringing me in. And it was unique to me. And I thought their integrity was really high. And that was really important to me. And so between hearing Bruce's message and seeing the integrity that the school and the coaches operated with, those were the things that sold me. And then when I got to Berkeley, I walk into Terry Shea's office and he's got a call he's got to get on. And he says, why don't you walk up to the top of the stands and see what that looks like? And again, first time in the Bay Area, I walk up to the top of Memorial Stadium and I look over the wall, right? The old stadium configuration. I look over the wall and it's a crystal clear, beautiful January day. And there's the, Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge and San Francisco. And it's just this sparkling jewel. I was like, oh my God, like this is gorgeous. What an incredible place. And so it all just kind of struck me on that trip. And then when Bruce sealed the deal on his trip down to my house, that Cal was the place for me. And it was a place where I could make the biggest difference in terms of changing a culture, changing an environment, and doing something special with a place that was really a hidden gem that had so much potential in it.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of people when they come out to Cal, if they hadn't been out here before, and they see the view, and the view alone almost seals the deal for so many people, right? It's just so perfectly situated where Memorial Stadium happens to sit, and those epic sunsets and, just the whole 9 yards it's really a sight to see.
And I would add, because I do games all over the country now, right? I've traveled, with Cal, I've traveled with NBC, I've traveled with Fox, doing games across the country. There is no more beautiful setting for a college football stadium than Cal's Memorial Stadium. Utah is beautiful where it's set. Washington has a really nice setting where it's set. But the way that our stadium is aligned, the way that our stadium is set into Strawberry Canyon and the view out the backside onto the bay, there's just no more beautiful backdrop for college football than Berkeley.
Couldn't agree more. talking about your time then at Cal, just to kind of follow up on this, do you remember any memorable classes that you had? And well, yeah. I wanted to ask, and I don't know, we didn't really talk about this offline if you're comfortable talking about it, but I was curious about the story Ken told in the previous episode about how you tried to get into Raleigh's using a fake ID with Troy Taylor's information. You want to
That a baby.
Well, legend has it that actually happened. And I would say, allegedly, if it were to happen, that, it was, that's how I met Ken. I was trying to get into Raleigh's. I couldn't get into Raleigh's because he knew the name on the ID. And so, not to get anybody in trouble, but I was like, come on, dude, let me in. And Ken's like, no, I'm not letting you in. And then he ends up being my roommate. And I told him, I was actually on LinkedIn the other day, that I was surprised that Ken didn't mention my legendary Jeopardy championship, because quite honestly, it's one of my favorite championships in the place. Between he and Andy Sugarman, we were all there and we would watch Jeopardy together. It was hotly disputed, but I was clearly champion of Jeopardy. So I wanted to get that out there as well, because that's really, it was kind of getting even for the whole ID incident at Raleigh's for me to win that championship in Jeopardy.
That a baby.
Yeah. But no, to kind of get back to your original question in terms of classes and everything else, hey, Ken was awesome. That the whole environment around football, what Ken Montgomery brought to that school, the electricity. When I talk to players who are at Cal now and players who are considering Cal now, the potential for this experience in a place that can be incredible for football, if you can win football games consistently, is so massive. Because Ken, as the mic man, and I love all the mic men that have come through, but Ken was the original, and he's the guy who literally set the bar for everybody else. Just unbelievable. He had control over a crowd. He had the ability. He actually knew exactly what was going on in the game, that everything happened at exactly the right time. He's super smart, and he just loves Cal. And that's what you're looking for in that position. Somebody who has all those tools. And obviously he went on to incredible success after that, but his ability to read the room, to command the room, and to be able to make it relevant to what's going on the field, it literally brought energy onto the field. So I always appreciated that as a player. He mentioned classics, and I don't remember what number it was, but with Professor Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic class. And it was really my first exposure to a philosophical approach with athletics, with Greek history. It's kind of, there was a little bit of Stoicism in there, though it wasn't about the Stoics. It was about ancient Greek athletics and how it played into the civilization. And so we learned about everything about the Greek way of thinking, very similar to what we do now. And I recognized the common thread of humanity that ran through from people of antiquity all the way through, modern day people. And it just kind of connected things for me on a philosophical level. And it's a little bit of the insights that come into the book originally, right? In that sport, Ken talked about me doing the speech on Joe Roth. When for an ancient Greek athlete to be a hero, they needed to be deceased as well, right? They needed to die before their time. And so when Stephen Miller puts it up on the board, he used to say, let's, which one of these guys are heroes? And he would put Walter Payton up there and Michael Jordan and all these different athletes who were incredible athletes. But then Joe Roth would be mixed in there, and none of the students knew who Joe Roth was. And I went and did a ton of research on Joe Roth. I actually called his parents, Larry and Lena, when I was playing at Cal and had them come out to a Cal game, because I personally wanted to let them know that Joe had not been forgotten, that people here still really cared about him and what it meant to the people here, me as a quarterback especially, because he personified what Cal was. And Stephen Miller, the professor of that class, gave me the opportunity to speak to my fellow students about Joe Roth and about what he brought to the university and about the type of person that he was. And so that's probably my most memorable class at Cal, because I was able to actually teach a little bit during the class, that I was able to speak. And it gave me the experience not of understanding the through line in human emotion, human behavior, but also the ability to teach and to find really a love of public speaking, because I did love bringing that back. Because if you're good at it and if you know how to do it, you really connect with your audience. And it gets back to what I was saying earlier. It's about teamwork. It's about us connecting with one another. It's about us being social with one another, which is really in the strength of what we do as people.
You are talking about what led me to come back to Cal in 1984. I met with Vice Chancellor Mac Letch at the time, Vice Chancellor Undergraduate Affairs. And he said to me in an alumni function that he was trying to bring the academic advising into the College of Letters and Science. And it wasn't so much about where we were academically as student athletes, but it was about really bringing the student athlete who appeared to only live as it relates to us as football on the top of the hill. And that we as student athletes brought so much more to the party than folks knew. All they thought is that we could jump tall buildings in a single bound, throw incredible passes, and run over people. But what you just described is what, really for me, what Bear Territory is all about. What you have described is for that student athlete to come to campus on a visit and not only see the great beauty, but the greatest value of all. And of course, it helps to win games.
Right.
But earning a degree from the greatest university in the world. And know that folks like us on this call still give back to our community, but where that small acorn was really deeply seated, created the mighty oaks and the mighty bears that we are today.
No doubt about it. There's a study, I talk about it in my book, by Dan Gilbert from Harvard. He's a psychologist. And it talks about what he calls the end of history illusion. And everybody who thinks of the last 10 years of their life, they look back and they think, wow, I've really grown. I've really improved over the last 10 years of their life. But when they look at their future, when they look at what's moving forward, they think that they're the finished product right now. So I'm as good as I'm going to get right now. I know what I know right now, and this is what the rest of my life is going to be. And it's one of those things that holds people back oftentimes, is that they don't see the future growth. They don't understand that they're going to pick up new skills, that they're going to learn new things, that they're going to invent or adapt or overcome different things that fall into their way. And so the nervous system naturally holds you back. All my work is at the kind of intersection of your physiology and your psychology. But because of that, that holds them back. Well, what you're talking about is you start at Cal and you don't know where you're going. And you have this incredible growth, and you go just like athletes, as you practice and you try things out and you make mistakes and you learn and you get better, and you have people surrounding you that do the same as well. And you create what's called entrainment, that everybody gets in the same rhythm of learning, of improving. And when you have a school-wide version of that, then you have this real impetus amongst people to get better, to improve, to find excellence. And Cal is at its absolute best when athletics are at their absolute best, because it brings people together around sports. When football is winning, when basketball is winning, when baseball is winning, when all of our sports are winning, crew and rugby and everything, then there is a togetherness, a teamwork, a patchwork that creates entrainment on campus that brings the vibrance of the campus up and makes it so much better. And I lived there during that time, 90 and 91, we had that going, 91 especially, that we were winning. Baseball was incredible. Football was incredible. Rugby with Jack Clark was incredible. And so swimming and the crew, everybody was winning. Everybody was winning. And the school and the campus was amazing. It kind of gives me the chills right now just thinking about it. And that's what's possible at Berkeley. And what detracts from that is people looking through their own little fiefdom, trying to guard their own little silo, trying to protect their farm, right? But if we all work together to build the whole thing, if we create that teamwork on campus, That's what makes Cal truly great. I've experienced it. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. And that's what I love about it.
There is absolutely no reason why Cal can't be both the top academic institution in the world and have a powerhouse athletic program. Absolutely. Across the board. And yeah, I mean, it was a magical time. And that's a big part of the reason why I think I am who I am, because that forged my identity at a time when I was trying to grapple with who am I? And you and Ken Montgomery and all these other people forge my identity. And that's evident in who I am today. And part of the reason why we're even having this discussion of this podcast here today. A little aside, I want to just mention this real quickly. You mentioned Joe Roth and his fight for life. And when I was a student assistant working in media relations with Kevin Renault, I was assigned the task of writing a little story on some of the different players. And so I saw the book, Joe, His Fight for Life, written by his mother there at the stadium. And I picked it up and started reading it and couldn't stop reading it and was so moved by it. And I remember clearly to this day that I had an appointment with Doug Bryan, your former teammate, to interview him for a little story. And I had just got to the point where I was at the culmination of the story and tears streaming down my face. And here comes Doug Bryan. I have to try to explain why I was kind of a mess emotionally.
Yeah, but it's moving. It's a very powerful story for anybody who's listening to this who went to Cal. If you don't know the story, you should read the story. It really is Cal's version of Brian's song. It's Cal's version of, losing somebody really special, somebody really talented, right? Talented quarterback, but a person who was a leader, a person who personified the Cal spirit, a person who personified teamwork. And we lost him too early to cancer. And it, how it affected the campus and the people around him. I still talk, I talked to Steve Bartkowski, and talked to Ron Cucimilio, who's still on campus, and all these guys who had the opportunity to play with Joe Roth, and they still remember him as such a leader and such a great person. And so that story definitely affected me the same way. So don't feel bad. When you were crying, I was right there with you.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk more about your book, Everyday Great. But before we kind of get to that, I'm just going to I can't help but just talk a little bit more about Cal and how you. Okay, so just to kind of set the stage for everyone so they understand, when you came to Cal, some of the quote-unquote recruiting experts pegged you as the worst quarterback recruit in the Pac-10.
Yeah, it was Don Heinrich. It was Don Heinrich, and it was Lindy's Magazine. I'll call him out. He was the one who said, I talked to his son later after that, and we laughed about it. But Don Heinrich said I was the worst recruit. And I'll tell you a story about that at the end of it, too. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But, here you were locked in a quarterback battle with Perry Klein, who came in with all kinds of accolades and was considered, supremely talented and all of this. And I remember heading into that 1990 season because Troy Taylor was no longer a quarterback. He'd run out of eligibility and had set all kinds of, career marks in the record books that didn't fall until I think probably Jared Goff came around.
Mm-hmm.
But, you basically seized that position. You said there were two things that stood out to me, and you mentioned it in the book. One was that when the media asked you if you were concerned and what your thoughts were going into the starting quarterback battle with Perry Klein, you just said, I'm not concerned about winning the starting quarterback job at Cal. I'm concerned about being the best quarterback in the nation, in the country. And like that, wow. I mean, what a bold declaration. And then heading into the Miami game, once you had taken that mantle of being QB1, there were people when Miami was coming to town in 1990. And so for people who don't understand, Miami was a defending national champion. This was a huge game in Cal sports history because people thought maybe Cal was not going to compete at all. And even the media was asking you questions like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to handle Miami coming in? Your answer was just like, well, we're going to win the game. We're going to win the game. And you were just direct, and we're going to go in there with the attitude to win the game. And that game was so monumental in terms of changing, I think, the psyche where people saw that Cal could compete with a Miami that had won the national championship the year before.
it's funny when people talk about that, and I put it in the book, in terms of being the best quarterback in the country, you get so caught up in the things that are right in front of you. And it's called top-down thinking. You're focused based on your experiences, your history, what you know, and you get caught up in that. And it creates anxiety and stress, and you start thinking about every little thing that causes a problem. And so when it came to that quarterback battle, I recognized that I was doing that. Perry was really good. It's funny, I used to joke that whenever they mentioned Perry Klein, the tagline that went with him was once 46 for 49 for 562 yards in a high school game. That was like, it was his tagline. Perry Klein, once 46 for 49 for 562 yards in a high school game, because he was really good. And he had Steve Clarkson, who was the first real quarterback coach that I can remember, coaching him while he was in high school. And he played at a really high level with a good quarterback coach. And so coming in, everybody expected him to be the starter. Well, hell, I'd beat cystic fibrosis. I'd beat lung disease. I wasn't going to back down to anybody coming in to tell me that I wasn't going to earn the starting spot. I wasn't going to be overlooked at a position which I had worked so hard to win.
That's right.
And so I recognized, again, I had always been a student of how my behavior affected my teammates too, of the things that I did. And I wanted to set the bar higher for our team. And so I said, I am not looking to win a quarterback competition here at Cal. If I did that, that would be small. That would be something that would keep me in the small universe of just being good at Cal. I wanted to be great at a national level. I wanted to be one of the best to play the game. And so nowadays the term is control the controllables. What could I control? My effort, my attitude, and what I was putting out there. And I knew that if I put it out there, if I told the story that we are looking to be better than just what we did here at Cal, that the team would also take that same approach. And I had the great fortune of playing with some unbelievable football players in guys like Troy Azine. And I'm going to start on the offensive line because that's where football starts and ends. That's where you win the game. Troy Azine was my left tackle, was an All-American, came in at 215 pounds, right? Just a string bean coming in. But he was unbelievable. I played with Todd Stussy on the other side, who was unbelievable, and Ernie Rogers in 1990 before that. So really good football players, all played pro. Steve Gordon was my center, part of my recruiting class, was an incredible center. He played pro for several years as well. We had Eric Malum at one guard. We had Jim Richards at the other guard. We had Daryl Pessler, who was a really good college football player, and Sammy Sagapolu. So we had really good guys up front. And then in the specialists, you give me Sean Dawkins and Brian Triggs and Mike Caldwell and even Anthony Randolph, who was kind of our next level guy, could all play the position. Russell White at tailback, Anthony Wallace at tailback, Lindsey Chapman at tailback. There were some dudes. And then Brent Woodall, who was my roommate for a little bit. Obviously, we lost him in 9/11. But he was an incredibly talented athlete at that tight end position as well. And he probably had the best hands on the team in terms of catching the football. And so as an offense, we were stacked. And then you can go across to the defensive side, and I always have to mention these guys because they always get bent out of shape because I think about offense, right? But you have guys like Cornell Collier up there. You have guys like Mac Travis at that nose guard, Chidi Ahanatu, who played on the other side of the ball. Jarrett Willard was an absolute stud at linebacker for us. On the outside, we had guys who could cover at corner. David Wilson at safety, who was really good. And so we came along and we changed the mentality by thinking bigger than just the locker room at Cal. By thinking bigger than just winning my competition here, we were thinking about winning the competition at the next level. And that's how that team grew, because the stories that you tell yourself, like I said earlier, are the stories that become your reality. And that's the behavior that you start to exhibit for your teammates. And that entrainment creates greatness within the team, not just an individual level. You have to have certain leaders that take that mantle and tell those stories. But the more they tell those stories, the more it becomes the truth. It's called a collective illusion. Todd Rose wrote a book about it. The more you repeat something that has value, that seems true, that has some teeth to it, the more it becomes the truth for an organization, for a team, for anybody else. And so I was going to take it upon myself to start those stories that made the difference for our team. And my teammates, because they were the same way Bruce Snyder recruited for, toughness, took up that mantle, and they continued to bring those stories to life, and we became the team that we became.
You're talking to the choir over here. My question, since you mentioned those guys, How often and how connected are you all still with those teammates?
So I talk to Troy Azine all the time. We discuss Cal football all the time, right? Troy's been around. He's my guy. Just saw Russ down for the LA Bowl, right? I'm not nearly as connected as I would love to be with those teams. For quite a while, we fought, and Troy was the one who led this, to get back on campus, to do things around the football program, to do things around the school, and it was always incredibly difficult. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it was incredibly difficult to get back in there to find a place. I love what they did for the 2004 team this year, right? Because that team deserved it. But we fought to get reunions for our team, and it was really, really hard to do. And even for our 30th reunion, and it was a tough year. But the team, it just wasn't embraced that way. And so that's what has to change at Cal, is they have to embrace the times that were great. And if you want to continue to have consistently good times, you have to embrace those things. The guys that put together, Matt Fox amongst them, right, Steve Levy, that put together this 2004 team, I think that's a great thing. And I think we need to honor the players who have come through. Because even if they weren't winning teams, you know how tough it is, Ahmad, to play, yep, to go to school, to spend all that time and all that effort and all that energy. It's difficult, and I think we need to honor that in our football players that come through. And I think all of our athletes, right, not just football players. I know my experience as a football player, but baseball, basketball, soccer, the swimming sports, all that. We need to honor that because they are the mantelpieces for our university. They are the guys who are out front, and they're doing, on top of being students, which we all know is difficult, they're also trying to be exceptional in athletics. And so trying to do two things really well and split your effort and your energy into both those things is tough. And so I think we should honor that.
I wholeheartedly agree with you there, Mike, that we should be honoring all the different athletes who've come through and have worked their butts off. But since we're kind of being a little critical of Cal here real quickly, I want to just mention this because we talked about it offline. But, I was lucky enough to go across the country and watch you guys in person there at the Citrus Bowl. I was such a huge fan. And, everything was trending in the right direction. The program that Bruce Snyder had put together. Mm-hmm. And then how in the world we let Bruce Snyder walk away and to go to Arizona State, where he eventually took Arizona State to the Rose Bowl. How in the world we let that happen? Did you want to just shed a little light on that?
Absolutely. Bruce, as my head coach, was a guy who exemplified exactly what we're after at Cal. He was a CEO type. His other coaches around him were more the motivator types. But Bruce had a vision, he had a process, he understood how to enact it, and he had super high integrity, like I talked about during my recruiting. And he was a guy that could be the perfect example as a football coach on Cal's campus. Well, I talked to Bruce right before he passed away. He had lung cancer, and then I think it got to his brain as well. But I talked to him. I went down there to go visit him because he was such an important figure in my life and a guy who I really appreciated and respected. And I was talking to him about it. And he said that he had a handshake deal in place with Dave Maggard before Dave took off for Miami. And it was at a value way less than what Arizona State had offered him. When we won, we go to the Citrus Bowl. We're 10-2. We're number 7 in the country. And Arizona State comes in and offers him a contract around $600,000. And Bruce went back, and Bob Bachroth had just taken over as the AD and said, look, Arizona State offered me this. I just want you to honor the contract that Dave and I agreed to. That's all I'm looking for, because he had such high integrity. And Bob Bachroth, from what I understand, from what I've been told, said, I suggest you take that deal. And so, there's inflection points in Cal history. That was one where we'd gotten the football program to a really good space and then let it fall off. Bruce understood what it was like to be a coach at Cal, what it took to be a great coach at Cal, and how to motivate and how to recruit the right type of athletes that were Cal guys through and through.
Yeah, no, it's just such a shame. I mean, when I think back at that time, to hear what you just said, it's just unconscionable to me to think that you just broke that momentum that you'd worked so hard to build up at that time. Ahmad, I know you got to probably leave soon. I want to just be mindful of that. You want to do your question here?
You and I have a great friend in common, Larry V, on Channel 7. here in KGL. The fact that you're involved, we hear your voice, we see you on television. That's amazing. How did you transition into that field? Because that's not easy. You've done an excellent job. And I know you. I'm biased, but I know you. But share with that, because that's what other things folks do when they think about what do I do after my career. But what other things did you do to gear yourself to make that?
Well, I appreciate that. Joe Starkey, legendary broadcaster, legendary play-by-play guy, the voice of the Bears, called me and said, hey, we've never had a sideline guy, and we think that you'd be great at this. And I said, that is awesome. I would love to come try it. And he said, call Kevin Renault, who you mentioned, Reza. And he said, call Kevin Renault and have him get all this approved, but we want you to be our sideline guy. I said, awesome, let's do it. So I called Kevin Renault. And again, the institution will never love you back because they got its boundaries. And the first thing out of Kevin's mouth was, we're not going to pay you for it. But the interesting thing to me was I wanted to be back in the community. I wanted to do this. I wanted to try the broadcasting because it sounded like a lot of fun. And here we are, almost 30 years later, and I'm still doing it and love it. And it's been a fantastic journey for me to kind of get to where I'm at, to be around Cal, to be able to do it. And I turned that into my own TV production company, which then did outdoor TV for 20 years and, did episodic television, which was great. And I enjoyed that too. And now I want to give back, creating that community, teaching people how to really harness the power of community and team and teamwork, whether it be in individual companies or whether it be in teams in terms of football teams, baseball teams, basketball teams, or whether it be in larger scale issues. And so that's, for me right now, that's where I really love giving back to people, teaching them the power of teamwork, teaching them how we work best when we're together, but also how to perform individually, how to develop that resilience and to find it in that team framework.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you just answered the next question I really had, which was what inspired you to write the book, Everyday Great? And when I read the book, I was just struck by all these great lessons, that you really can speak to with a lot of authority, and about how building resilience that you need to be able to be successful in life and being comfortable in the uncomfortable. Like, seek out those challenges, because when you take on those challenges and try to overcome those challenges, that's when you grow as a person. And our current society basically tries to make life as comfortable for people as possible, like you've noted. And that's actually doing us a disservice, because if you just go along with that and are okay with leading a life of comfort, well, your body suffers, your mind suffers. And, the thing I'm most impressed with, I think, in the book is just how you really make it clear with you're getting your mind right, your mindset, and how your identity will basically inform so many different decisions that you make in your life, how you see yourself. And just to kind of go on, but the idea of giving maximum effort and your attitude. So there's just so many things. Oh, and one of the other cool things that I thought you pointed out, and it's so important that I think people don't really think about too much, is that in life, nobody's trying to stop you or hold you down, right? In football, it's a different situation. You have a team that's specifically trying to stop you, right? And trying to hold you back. But in life, you don't have that. You don't have anything to stop you from being who you could be. And anyway, just brilliant job there on writing that book, Mike. And so that's leading then into this next phase of your career, really, where you are being a motivational speaker and a keynote speaker for a lot of different companies and team building, like you said. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, team building, leadership building, part of what I do. I've met a really insightful person, Craig Martin, also a Cal man, and we've started doing some leadership training for companies. And then, of course, my keynote speaking that I do for groups, organizations, companies, associations, all of that. But, and you just kind of encompassed a lot of stuff in there. But let's start with the premise that no matter what you do in life, you're always training, period. You are always training yourself one way or the other. Our human physiology and our psychology is designed to adapt to the resistance that we face. And so if we're facing resistance on a physical level, we build more muscle. If we're facing resistance in terms of being able to breathe like Ahmad and I had when we were younger, then we develop more space and more ability for our lungs and strengthen our lungs to breathe better by training that. And if we are training ourselves that we want more comfort all the time, that we want to feel better, that we just want to be happy, that we're looking for the easy thing, then we are never training ourselves to be more resilient for when the hard thing happens. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Hard things are going to happen in life because they happen to everybody. This connects back to what I was talking about with that classics. The through line of human existence is that difficult times happen. You're going to have them during your life. You're going to lose people that you love. You're going to lose jobs. Something's going to happen in your life, which is not going to be ideal. And so you have to have resilience to get through that. And if you haven't trained yourself to understand the physiological signals your body sends you, if you haven't trained yourself to understand the psychology behind it, if you haven't done the work to do hard things, you will not know how to face hard things in your life. And unfortunately, society right now and internet and everything else out there is trying to train people that comfort is the most important thing. Comfort is what you seek. And comfort is not what you seek. What you seek is confidence. What you seek is the ability to overcome the hard things that come your way. And that's what gives you comfort. But you can never really be comfortable if you're just seeking comfort. That was a self-esteem movement, which backfired on itself. And so the ability to face hard things, the ability to overcome things, the ability to be resilient is what gives you true comfort and confidence in life. And so I wrote the book based on my childhood illness, based on my history and learning how to overcome, but understanding the fact that you are always training yourself physically, psychologically, mentally, and the tools that we have at our disposal to make that better. That's what I base my keynote speeches around. That's what I base my leadership training around. I teach people how our physiology and how our psychology interact to make us better human beings. I teach them how they can use their physiology to become more resilient. I teach them a couple of frameworks that when you use them, they're what's called an implementation intention. I know that if I do these things, I'm going to grow, and I understand that I'm going to grow. And so I use those tools to be able to show people that they will grow given the opportunities that they have, and that they can use that and connection with other human beings to really become the best version of who they are, to build those teams, to become the people that they want to be. And it's at that point that you develop comfort. It's at that point that you develop confidence, which is what we're all going after.
Amen, brother. That is it. That just brings me to the question that we asked, but you just have inspired me like you always do, Mike P. I think, as I've said many times before, that my father said to me once, because I was still at Cal, being an advisor and Dean's rep in letters and science when you were then studying late till 96. But when folks you had connections with or you've seen grown who were considered your young bears or the cubs as they develop into bears, but when you see that mentee possess the qualities and characteristics mentally, spiritually, community-wise, and they become the mentor, I feel like as an alum, as a Cal Bear student athlete alum, I've done my job in my relationship with you. And you are now the mentor, my guy. You are now the mentor, and I am so proud.
I appreciate that, my brother.
When we see each other, I always give you a hug, and we're both moving from one frame to the next frame or one mic to the next mic. But you truly are Bear territory. Tell us, if you could, while you were in school or as you were going through your journey now, what would you say was your Bear territory moment?
So there's so many, right? Because you learn how to compete when you're at Cal. You learn how to, you're competing it all the time, right? And so you learn all that. But I would say the thing that typifies it for me, that when I look back and I think about my Cal journey, there's a couple of them. And it was, you talked about some of the great games that we played. We were playing Clemson, and we had come full circle from a team that was 1-9-1, I think, the year before we arrived, to playing in the Citrus Bowl on New Year's Day with this team that was under-recruited, that was, Azim was also considered a bad recruit. Steve Gordon was just, none of these guys were high-level superstar recruits, but we had grown from this level of being derided as recruits to now being all Pac-10 at the time, right? All Pac-10 players, all Americans. I ended up, because of my linemen, because of my team around me, being the Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year. And so these guys who weren't good enough all of a sudden became the cream of the crop in the conference. And we're playing Clemson, and the whole week for that Clemson bowl game, their fan base was down there. And Clemson as a team was on curfew. They had to be in at like midnight every night. And so they'd be in, and we'd still be out hanging together as a team, doing what college players do when you're on the road in Orlando. And we'd see the Clemson fans, and it would just be the Cal football team and the Clemson fans. And the Clemson fans were always the same. They were nice as can be, but they were absolutely certain that they were going to kick our ass. They were 100% certain of it. And so you'd have these nice Southern ladies come up to you and be like, well, it's so nice of y'all to come down here and give us a game. It's too bad we're going to have to kick y'all's ass, right? And so that's what we were getting on the road. And we were like, you have no idea. We are going to throttle your team. Like, what we're about to dismantle what you've got coming at us. And they didn't have the framework to handle it. Well, so we go and play Clemson. We play in that game, and we're winning. We're winning big. We're doing what we know we can do. We're hitting our trick plays, right? We're making plays. Brian Triggs gets his first punt return for a touchdown. Like, there's a bunch of really good stuff happening in this game. And it's the end of the third quarter, and Bruce comes over to me and says, you've had a great career. I'm really proud of what you've accomplished. And it's been great watching you. Enjoy the final moments of this game. We're going to pull you out and let the guys behind you play. And I look at him, I'm like, no, I want to hang 50 on these guys. Like, let me hang 50 on them, which was my nature. And like, that was our team, right? And Bruce said, no, we're not going to do that. Because, like I said, high integrity guy all the way. And so he pulled me, and I sat back and kind of saw full circle from when I got recruited, and Don Heinrich called me the worst recruit at quarterback in the Pac-10 that year, to becoming Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, to dismantling this Clemson team, which was a good football team, right? Levon Kirkland was there. Brinston Buckner was there. Chester McLaughlin. Like, they had some dudes on that team. And so to go and to do that full circle, and, I went over and hugged my parents, and like, to be with my teammates and see where we had come from to where we arrived. That was really my Bear Territory moment. Seeing who I was, to seeing who I had become, and seeing how the work that I had put in, how I was always training to go from that lowly recruit who came out of a wing tee, who knew nothing about real football, how to play the position, to becoming a college, all-star, and with a team surrounded by phenomenal players, phenomenal team. That's my Bear Territory moment. That encapsulates it all for me right there.
Thank you, brother. We appreciate it.
Beautifully said. Well, wrap it up right now, and just want to thank you so much, Mike. I mentioned this to you offline, but the very first time I met you was at a Hooters in Orlando a few days before you guys played in the Citrus Bowl in late December 1991. And as you were leaving, the shy Cal fan that I used to be, I managed to get your attention. I shook your hand and simply said, thank you for everything you've done for Cal. And now here I am decades later, and I think I speak for Cal fans worldwide when I once again say to you, thank you for everything you've done for Cal. You've served as an incredible inspiration to countless Cal fans. Thanks again for being on the show. Go Bears.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on here today. I love being on here with my Cal family. And as always, as I say on my podcast, go Bears.
And in Bear Territory, you know the story. Tell the story. Go Bears.
How good was that? Thank you again to Mike for being on the show. He really has such a deep understanding of how we work as humans, our need for connection, and our need to exercise control over difficult situations that build the resilience and confidence that leads to comfort. I want to encourage all of you out there to get your hands on his book, Every Day Great, the playbook for winning at everything. It's truly a game changer that lays out a path to develop the mindset necessary to achieve success. So much good stuff that you can read about in his book, and we didn't even talk about his face-to-face encounter with a grizzly bear. If you've already read the book, do Mike a favor and write him a review on Amazon. It's easy to do, and he'd certainly appreciate it. You can also join his new email list. Simply text the word GREAT to 55444. That's GREAT to 55444. Each email promises to be full of good information about all of the topics he covers in his book. And if you want more of Mike, you can also look for him on the Bear Insider Ultimate Insider podcast with Mike Pawlawski. That's going to do it for this week's episode. I say it every week, but we really do appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. If you are enjoying these podcasts, please tell your friends. Next week, we get to sit down with former Cal basketball player and assistant coach, John Wheeler. We're looking forward to hearing all kinds of fun stories about his time at Cal and learn more about his coaching philosophy. Before we go, I'd like to remind you about the ACTS ALS Foundation. You can learn more about its mission to help change ALS from a terminal disease to a treatable disease by visiting axals.org. That's axeals.org. If you're able, please consider making a donation or buying some merchandise from their website. And finally, we would love to see you at Raleigh's this Wednesday, January 15th, for our first in-person get-together. Ahmad's schedule is still a bit up in the air, but I can promise you I'll be there at 4 p.m., and I hope to see you there. See you next week. As Doctor Who famously says, we're all stories. In the end, make it a good one. What stories do you want to share? We want you to tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears!